Madeleine Kioke, Madeleine, Kioke, Kioke. I'm a member of the Attawabiskat First Nation. I was actually born in somewhere in the wilds of Attawabiskat. I grew up in Moosonee. I'm now living in Timmins for the last 27 years. It's my dad's story as told to me when I was growing up about his brother who was lost in 1941. My uncle disappeared in 1941. My dad reluctantly shared his story because it was so painful for him when I was younger. And because my dad is now gone, all his brothers and sisters are gone. My generation, my sister, myself, and my brother, the three of us would probably be the only three that actually have the real story about my Uncle John. My Uncle John Kioke disappeared from the residential school in April of 1941. He was at the St. Anne's Residential School in Fort Albany, Ontario. Yes, he was a member of three who disappeared in the spring of 1941, and there's a lot of stories about them, and they're called the Three Boys. I'm not really sure how old he would have been, but when he disappeared, I think he was about 14, 15. From what I heard from my dad, they used to go by boat. They called it the missionary boat. It was a wooden boat that traveled the James Bay. The James Bay is a water on the east. Hudson's Bay and James Bay and Hannah Bay are the bays in my area, and the boat would travel from Moosonee north on the James and Hudson's Bay, and that's the boat that would pick up students from along the shore, and that's how he would have ended up there. From what I understood when I was hearing the stories from my grandmother, from my dad, the expectations was there. I don't think that they wanted to go there. They were forced to go there, but their expectation was that they'd be treated well. But unfortunately, as evidenced by his running away, it wasn't that way at all. When my dad was telling the story, he had said that his brother was very, like he knew what he wanted, and if something was done wrong to him, he would try to work it out, and he was, because of that, he was looked at as a troublemaker, and he didn't, I guess, I'm trying to find words here because I'm having a hard time. My train of thought is all over. But he was a young lad who knew what he wanted, and he knew what his role was at home, and for some reason that his residential school experience at the time did not match with what he wanted at the time. So because it didn't, they were punished for things that they didn't even do. They weren't fit as well as they should have. So a bunch of other things led to the decision when he chose to run away. My dad didn't know any particulars of why they ran away, other than when they did run away, and he was part of the search party to go and look for them. So, but he didn't have a story as to why they did it and how they plan to do it, kind of thing. When I was younger, my dad would tell us the story of family life prior to his meeting my mother, being with his family, his brothers, different things like that. And as time went on, he started to share his brother disappearing. And I wasn't aware of my uncle having disappeared until 1967, I think. Would have been, I would have been 6 or 7 when I started hearing little bits and pieces of my uncle disappearing, because I remember in 1957, my grandmother used to say prayers on the trap line. We'd be on the trap line, and every evening we'd have prayers before we went to bed. And I remember my grandmother praying that she might see her son again. But at the time I never questioned it. I just assumed that my Uncle John was somewhere and he'd be back. But as I got older and as my dad started sharing the story, and he always shared the story with tears in his eyes. And I didn't, as I got older, I started to find out a little bit to what happened. When my uncle and his 2 friends, there was a Michelle Sutherland and Michelle Matness, along with them, decided to run away. My dad was involved in looking for them in the spring of, I don't know when exactly, April or May, but they found them. They took them back to the school. And that was the tears behind my dad's eyes, was because of the fact that he went looking for him. He found him. Not just him, it was his dad and other men that went searching and found them. And they took them back to the residential school. And when my dad took his brother back, he told him, June is just a couple of months. You'll be home. He always said those were his famous last words to his brother. And that was the reason he always told the story with tears in his eyes, was because, like he said, if it weren't for him, his brother would still be alive. And which is the reason why I wanted to share the story, because my dad never had a chance to. He was never able to share the story. He was never able to take that pain away. He always felt it, and sometimes it would come out in different things, like he turned to alcohol to ease the pain. And when he would get mad, that would come out, and he'd be violent. At some points he would, in his, maybe in his alcohol, it would come out, and he would hit something or somebody, and that somebody was either the priest or the bishop or the people that were part of punishing his brother. Later on, as I got older and I heard more of the story, and this is stories that he heard from other people that were part of the residential school at the time, is that the 3 boys were punished quite severely because of their running away. And as part of their punishment, they were segregated, like away from the main population, and then they disappeared. He didn't know how they disappeared. People were saying that people told him And I heard this other stories from other people later, much later in life, that they were punished so severely that they might have died as a result of their injury. Or another story from another man who said they killed one. They had to kill the other two because the other two were witnesses to the first person that was killed. But when the missionaries started providing documents as to reports or whatever, they never told the RCMP about the disappearance of the boys until later. And they always said they might have died because it was spring, and they might have been swept away to the James Bay. Or Hudson's Bay is how they put it. Hudson's Bay is quite a ways from where they were, like hundreds of miles, so I'm not sure why they said that. But the documents that were provided by the missionaries that I have seen were totally inconsistent with what my dad and my grandmother told us when we were young. There's a story that my grandmother provided a letter in Cree, which was translated, that forgave the priests for the fact that the boys disappeared. And I sincerely believe that's not true at all. The document somehow was made up. Many of the documents that were given as a result of reporting and whatnot were just totally false. I call them the cover-up letters, the cover-up documents, the cover-up stories, because I think that's what they were. We'll never know because there's nobody to tell the story anymore. But I wanted to share the story of my uncle because my father never got the chance to share the story of his brother. And if I don't share the story, because of my siblings are much younger and probably didn't get the same story that I have, it's up to me, my sister, and my brother, who are part of the, when we were in the bush, is where we heard it most, when we were living off the land before we got into living in town, kind of, where we were just a family. And so the older ones in my family are the only ones that share it. And I think it's just the three of us, myself, my older sister, and my brother, who was 3 years younger than me. If we don't tell that story, I don't think it'll ever be told. And I want to be able to share it so that my great-grandchildren and their grandchildren will know a bit of the history of my family and the residential school as well. I am also a survivor of St. Anne's Residential School. My expectation of going there was totally different from what it was when I got there. At the same time, my mother was sort of forced to take us or to allow us to go there because of my dad's health at the time. He had tuberculosis, and the priest at the time suggested that my mother couldn't handle all her kids. So some of us had to go to residential school. And so my expectation was to be there, to be treated nicely, to have a bed to sleep in, to have good food, but it didn't happen that way. And so when I think of my uncle, he must have had a worse time. He must have had a real bad time. And so I don't want his story to just disappear. I want his name to be mentioned 10 years from now as being part of the 3 boys who unfortunately disappeared from the school. However it happened, I don't want him to be lost in history and gone and never have a story to be told because I think the story that the missionaries gave was totally false. I believe that when I see all the documentation that they provided and how late they reported to the RCMP at the time, and if they were so caring for those boys, why did they not report them right away? I understand there was, like, it might have taken a doc team 3-4 days to go and tell the story, but why not do it? And so for those reasons, for the reason that they had tried to hide the story or the fact that the boys disappeared, I want it shared. I want to share it with as many people as I can. And not, my dad's pain was real. I remember him crying. I remember him sobbing. I remember even my grandmother when she cried, and it wasn't just a natural cry. It was a wailing of sort and pain. And for that reason, I want to share this story. When my uncle disappeared and my dad said he took him back to the school, that was in April of 1941. So they had no contact with his brother from the time that he took him back to the school when they found them, either in late April or I don't know the exact time frame from when the boys ran away and my dad found his brother and took him back to the school. I don't know the timeline of that. All I remember was my dad saying my famous last words to my brother were, "June is not too far away, you'll be coming home." And then they had no contact with them at all. And then when it was time for the students to come home, when people were, I'm not sure how they were taken home, but he was not part of the students that went home. And that's when they realized that they disappeared. Until then, they didn't know that they had disappeared again. According to the missionaries, they ran away, they were brought back and they ran away again. But most of the stories that I saw made it sound like they only ran away once, that April of 1941. That's the stories I heard. And that's what I see in documents. It never mentioned that my father and his father and a few other men found those boys and took them back. That there is nothing that says that, but that's what my dad told us, me and my siblings, and so they never told anybody until June, when the boys didn't come home, and that was the same with one of the boys. The mother didn't. She was never told that her boy disappeared. It wasn't until June when the kids came home that she found the boy. Her boy wasn't there either. So I don't know. I don't think they told the parents of the second disappearance at all, because it wasn't until June that I don't think they even told them. It was when the students were going home and the boys were not home. When what my grandmother had told us or had shared somewhere along the way was she and Albert Matanas, not she, but my grandfather and Albert Matanas went to check to confirm that the boys were somewhere, and they were not. That was when they realized that the boys were no longer around. That's when they were told that the boys had run away. Whether it was again or they're still talking about April, I don't know. But it wasn't until much later that they found out he wasn't there, he wasn't around. And I don't know how much of an investigation happened because my dad didn't really go into details about after the fact because he was dealing with his pain having to do with the fact that he found his brother. He took him back to the school and he told him, yeah, it's only a couple more months, you'll be home in no time. That was where most of his story ended, was that at that point. He didn't go into detail about the investigation. The investigation that I read about didn't happen until the RCMP got told about it, maybe like in August or maybe later of that year. Yes, I was part of the school starting around 64, 65. One of my siblings was part of it. She also ran away. They ran away in the middle of winter. I don't know what month. She's 5 years younger than me, and they were punished. They were punished. They were found and brought back to the school, and they were punished. I'm not sure what kind of punishment that they got, but I remember her reacting to the punishment, and I remember them being isolated from other students. I don't know exactly what she was punished, how she was punished, because she doesn't really tell the story, but she'll mention it once in a while. But even then, which was around 64, 65, they were punished. They wanted to run away, and it was the fact that the nuns would punish you for no reason. I got punished just because I'm walking down the hall beside another girl, and we're delivering something to the I'll call it the parish, the priest's dining room, and I'm not sure. I think we were supposed to walk a certain way, and we didn't, and we got whacked on the head with that. And we were punished for smiling. We were punished for our hair being out of place, or paying too much attention to our hair, or combing our hair too many times, or they seemed to find fault in just about everything. And you could just be sitting doing nothing. You got hit. I was hit for no reason. Some of the times I was hit, I didn't even do anything wrong. I was just sitting, or standing, or smiling, or thinking. And so, in my own experience, I've seen people being punished for no reason at all. I saw my friend Mary get beaten because she combed her hair too long. They called her I forget the word they use, vain. She was vain. She was trying to pretty herself up, kind of thing. And I was punished for smiling. I had to sit in the middle of the girls' room for hours at a time. Another incident I was punished for is I had to go to walk a girl to this little store that the priest had not too far away. It was in the springtime, and there was a guy getting water, so I asked the guy, has it broken up yet? Because we don't see the river from where we were. I just asked him that one question. When I got back to the school, inside the school, I was punished, and I was made to take a toothbrush and wash the floor of the girls' room, me and the girl I was with. All I said was, has the river broken up yet? Yet we spent hours on our hands and knees cleaning the girls' room with a toothbrush, because all I wanted to know was if the river was broken up. I want to be able to share the story of my uncle so it's not forgotten, based on what my dad and my grandmother told me, not what the documents say, not what the priest said, because their story is false. My mother once told me that my dad was in pain all the time because of that, because he blamed himself for taking his brother back. And for that reason, I wanted to share his story. And I wanted to share it the way that I heard it, the way that he told it to me. Because I think the stories from the missionaries and the documents that they provided are all false. And I want to be able to share it for my grandchildren and their grandchildren to know the truth. And I want the world to know that my uncle was an important human being, and he deserved better than what he got, the way he was treated. So I want that truth to be told, as told to me by my dad. Because after this, other than my two siblings I mentioned who grew up with me as part of living on our traditional lands and territory, living off the land, I don't think my younger siblings know the story. And even though my dad did tell the story as I was growing up, like I remember him telling that story at some point when I was 16, 17, that age, but the unpack of his stories may not have been related to my siblings as much as it was to me and my older sister and my brother. So for that reason, I want to share that story for my great-grandchildren and their children. So hopefully 100 years from now, somebody will say, okay, that was John Kioke was, a great uncle or a great-great-uncle. Yeah, that's the reason I want to share that story. I have the documentation that I keep referring to, the stories, the bishop saying that my grandmother wrote this letter, it's been translated. What I wanted to do was be able to present those documents and say that these documents are false. Because my grandmother didn't say this, my grandmother didn't say that, and my dad didn't say that. And hopefully people know that the documentation are not necessarily the truth, even if it came from a priest. Because my dad knew the story and my grandmother knew the story, and their stories are what I believe.